get underway, but I think first just to maybe to introduce Barry, to introduce the context of tonight's lecture, and then maybe I could say a few words about the lecturer, and then we get underway. We have an introduction to the introduction to the introduction, starting with Barry, who's the wonderful Philip Johnson Chief Curator of Architecture and Design, something like that, at the Museum of Modern Art, which is a place in Midtown that I recommend, particularly right in this moment where there is a stunning exhibition. It's probably the most amount of square meters that architecture has occupied in that museum for a very, very long time, and I mean architecture with a capital A. It's an absolutely splendid exhibition, and no matter how much you think you know and love Labrouste, you will leave the exhibition with several Labroustes, I think, in your mind, and many, many more questions. And that is, of course, the astonishing thing about that architect. And we all owe Barry and his fellow curators from France an incredible debt of gratitude for kind of lifting Labrouste back up in front of our eyes in a slightly different way, and allowing us to see these drawings, which are, if you have ever thought that you would do a drawing in your life, do not visit this exhibition. This is an exhibition that could be used as a cure against drawing, because the guy could draw so well that you'll be disillusioned if you go to it. So I'm giving you two recommendations. You must go to see this exhibition, and you must not. And the curator is Barry. And Barry's going to introduce a little bit why we are together tonight, and we'll be again together tomorrow.
So thank you, Mark, and thank you, Gavin, who just immediately said yes when I phoned and said, could we begin the symposium that I wanted to have about Labrouste at Columbia in a School of Architecture, and then, like Labrouste, move from a School of Architecture to where he is now in the museum. Partly with the idea, my two colleagues, co-curators, Marc Lecoeur from the Bibliothèque Nationale and Corinne Bélier from the Cité de l'Architecture in Paris, are here, and we first presented that show there, and we had a two-day symposium in Paris that presented a lot of new scholarship on the 19th and early 20th century. So it didn't seem to make much sense simply to repeat that here, and I thought that the symposium could be part of thinking collectively about the question that I have to answer. I'm not going to answer it right now. If you want to hear the answer, you'll have to come tomorrow morning. What I'm asked over and over again, which is why Labrouste, why in New York, why at MoMA, and why now? And this symposium is about those questions. And since it is about questions, I'm not going to give my answers now. I want them to come out in dialogue with so many people who have said, oh my gosh, Labrouste for me is, beginning with Alberto tonight, is a hero. I would love to think about him in relationship to now and to me and to why I do architecture, why I think about architecture. So that is what we're going to do around a series of themes that start to give it away tomorrow. One is teaching and thinking through pedagogy. Labrouste was a great teacher. The second is to think about why the library still exists in the digital age. Why would you possibly make and go to a library when you can do everything in theory on a screen from here, but yet people keep building them, including Alberto Kalach, who's going to speak to us this evening. And the third is my notion that the modernists could see the metal in Le Corbusier, the postmodernists could see the lettering and the stone, and perhaps in our digital age we can actually even see that greatest of all taboos, the ornament and the pattern, and understand what all those three things did coming together in a very, very strange but still incredibly compelling and perplexing combination in Labrouste's work. So without any further ado, I'm going to give it back to Mark. Thank you for letting us launch here. I hope those of you who can will join tomorrow and, of course, see the exhibition. And I'm thrilled that Alberto Kalach has agreed to launch things.
Thanks, Barry. It continues to be somehow very, very important to the school to maintain that lively relationship with MoMA, and Barry's been wonderful in creating a personal bridge that leads to a kind of academic bridge, and ultimately, I think, a kind of theoretical bridge. A few words of welcome to Alberto. It's so great that you're here. Anything I say at this point is you should ignore, because he's about to give the lecture. Why would anybody anyway ever give an introduction, since you're going to get the lecture anyway? So why would you need it to be filtered by somebody. So I try to say as little as possible, to filter it as little as possible. This is a very beautiful architect, formed the TAX office in 1981 with a partner, then I think around about 2002, split a little bit, and some of his interests seemed to shift a little bit. They went simultaneously really small and really big, and I mean really, really small, like a $5,000 house on the one side, and on really big on the other side, like I think the single biggest project ever. Probably not just in Mexico, but in the South. I mean, the strategic plan for the big dry valley bed, which you may or may not see today. But of course, probably the reason we're gathered here is for this extraordinary library. Even the expression mega library that was used at the time, mega itself as a word seems to have no longer be big enough to capture our world. But at the very least, you have 38,000 square meters that opened in 2006, and then I think very much would be in the spirit of a mega library, that it would open again, that would have 2 openings in 2008. And it's a project with a kind of infinite gallery. It's as if knowledge itself, even as if all knowledge could be contained within a single view. Even there's a kind of hypothesis in this project that the view itself could be a kind of a library, that everything you could see could be, as it were, stored in that view. And this thought, this relationship between the library, the view, and knowledge goes to the very heart of the deepest fantasies that architects have ever had about form. So I think it's super interesting, both from the point of view of the library, but also what it is that architects can do. But it's also quite possible that this is really not a building, but a garden that has inside it a kind of 250-meter long gallery. And I think the question of the garden is very, very strong in this work, which means that Alberto actually changes our understanding of what a garden is. It's not just nice green things and so on. It's a very, very different perspective. And for that reason, I'm going to shut up and give way to a very, very fine architect, and we feel very honored that you're here tonight.
Oh, thank all of you, and it's my pleasure. It's an honor for me to be here. I always say that this is not a lecture; it's just a talk, informal talk. I'm not an academic, and as you will see, it's going to be pretty much improvised, random photos of several projects, different scale. But to start with, I would like to make this reflection. I think architecture hasn't changed much for the last 2,000 years, maybe. In fact, the Vitruvius Principles, this Roman architect that wrote a manuscript with architectural principles, he mentioned like 3 basic principles: beauty, firmness, and utility. And I do believe those principles are still true, or at least for me. No, I think even though there are contemporary architects that says that beauty is a byproduct, and that I think beauty is the essence of many of the things that human beings do. So, how a building relates to a site, how a building relates to the sun, to the wind. I think how it's built, how it's constructed, I think those things still are the basic things of architecture. And through these examples, we will, I would try to point out maybe a little bit repetitive all these principles. So to start with, I'm going to start with a temple. It's a synagogue in Mexico City. It's a project that we started and then we couldn't finish it. For me, it was finished, but for the client, it was not. So then they hired an interior architect, and he put a lot of stuff there. But here, basically, it was like a big monolith surrounded by a garden. The garden, of course, had this accent of, let's say, Middle East vegetation. And the building was this monolith, everything the same material with an oculum at the very center of the ceremony, because the ceremony is preceded from the center of the room. Of course, that's not the altar, it's the door, which is looks like a cross. Maybe that's why they throw me out. But no matter where is God, and this, I think this space is about introspection, about being, I'm not religious, so I won't go into that, but basically it's one space with some accessories downstairs. Of course, even though everything is concrete and travertine floors, the light is the main theme of the building, that which will make the concrete sometimes very heavy, but sometimes almost disappears or melts. This is another project. This is the library. I'm not going to talk much about this building because, well, maybe tomorrow either. But the site was a very long site, narrow and long site. So we immediately thought about making a long building, and of course, we thought on Boulet's library, this one space that contains all the books, all the knowledge. Nevertheless, in the Boulet scheme, I suppose there were much less books that the amount of books that were required in this competition. So from this Roman vault, we went to the three floors with a Mayan art, where all the books were at the center. The books were the main theme. The books were I think what makes a library different than an airport or a shopping mall, even though nowadays many libraries looks like shopping malls. We thought that the library should look like a library, and the books, the main theme of the building. So here we see the plan. It's a very repetitive, very simple building, like a big nave, in between the gardens, and the gardens with different topics. As the books are classified inside the building, the plants could be classified outside the building. So there are different themes of different gardens, different climates. As you know, Mexico as a country has a lot of different climates: desert, jungle, forest, high altitude forest. In section is also one space, 3-story space, but it's only one space at the end, with light from the north and views to the garden through east and west direction. So it's this a little bit the feeling of the main space, the light filtering through the book stacks. The book stacks are hanging from above, and that was a solution that we came out for structural reasons. It was easier to hang the library, the bookshelves, than to support them in horizontal cantilevers. Of course, the library now has computers, but we have computers in our telephones, we have computers in our cars at homes, but I think computer won't make a difference. A library is about books. In fact, in the word biblioteca comes from Greek, I think, which is the cage where the books are stored. So basically, we have this space with the corridors, two scales, the scale of the reading rooms, which are much higher, facing the gardens, and the scale of the book stacks, which are very low, and where you're capable of grabbing a book easily. So even though it's a unique space, and the challenge was not to make it monotonous, so inside this monotony there is a natural labyrinth which happens in any library when you approach to the different themes, to the classification of the books, you enter to different paths into the labyrinth. But at the same time, you have a complete feeling of the space. So there is certain wonder, discoverment, a piece of art made by Gabriel Orozco. The reading rooms facing the garden, with protected to the sunbeams, but still you have beautiful views to the garden. And the gardens, which these are old photographs, there was not a single tree in this area, so we made a big effort to build this garden. To me, gardening is a very important part of architecture. Is the way that architecture relates with, one way to relate with nature, to control and relate the building with nature. So there are other accessories like offices, all the functions that are not the library itself, which the modern functions, offices, auditorium, conference rooms, all those things are out of the building and somehow not underground but under gardens. So the main building remains the purest as we could do it. That's the auditorium, which is out of the building, like a stone in the garden. Some pre-existences of the site. It was an industrial site. Well, this is another project, this high-rise building for apartment building in Mexico City. It's a very, once again, very simple building. We made several studies of the building, and we ended with a, not very, a very, very clear and very simple scheme. It was for a construction company who did this competition. We wanted to win the competition, and we did a building for engineers. So it was a very clear structure with the facade as the structure. Facade and the nucleus, the elevator shaft, is the structure, which is very efficient. As you know, Mexico City is a seismic zone. We have strong earthquakes and very, very bad soil, so there are piles that go down like 150 feet underground. So as you see here, that's the structure. The facade is the structure and the central core, which, I mean, is not an invention, it's just the way it should be. A lot of parking underneath, which is a real problem in Mexico City because we haven't developed a good public transportation system, so we have to put a lot of cars into each side. We did all the structure is out of concrete. We use pigmented concrete with some product, which I think is a very interesting option to get out of the gray concrete and work with color. In fact, recently I got a photograph, just very recent, of the building that was there that didn't exist when we visited the site, building from the 30s, and it was painted in the same color. And I wonder if each site has a predetermined color. So it's the main Reforma. This is the main avenue of the city with all these monuments that were done by Emperor Maximiliano in the 19th century. So the building is very sober, like belongs to that place somehow. Structurally, we have apartments facing to the front and to the back with the shaft at the center. We can catch also some light through both boundaries, and that's the main avenue of the city. And on top, there is a collective space for all the inhabitants of the building with that's a backyard, which is on top of the parking lot. Of course, it's a green roof, but the green roof with a huge bamboo and palms and trees, which is will be part of the activities of the building. Of course, this massive facade, which is also the structure, gives the shelter that apartment building need. It's not an office building. You need intimacy, you need sound control. So we thought that go a little bit more massive will give you the possibility of having terraces, little terraces or balconies. That's the central shaft during construction. We shouldn't go into details. I mean, the apartments are modules that, depending on the size of the apartment, the modules could repeat. Of course, we didn't do that. We didn't bring that furniture in, which is horrible. And on top, there is this roof garden with a large swimming pool. The swimming pool was painted by an artist, Marco. And it's like a greenhouse as well, where we have exotic palms and vegetation that is really exciting to be there in 25th floor with an exuberant garden. Okay, this is a very small building. Once again, it's a structure. The building is a structure. Here we see the sheer walls, the columns, and are 150-meter apartments, open space, but with a green wall, but not these green walls that they are like 2 feet deep, but this is maybe 20 feet deep. Depends on the plants that you use and the amount of space that you devote for the garden, for the facade. I think this is at least in Mexico, is a fantastic device that helps to control sun, views. It's like a filter for the pollution that we suffer much in the city. And I think it's a great facade. I mean, maybe it's the best facade we have done. So the space is, an open space is the central area where the kitchen and bathrooms are concealed in that box that also receive light, natural light from above. And this is another project, is a school that we did in Guadalajara, Mexico. At the beginning, we were exploring different alternatives, different possibilities. We wanted to have a lot of open space for the children, for the students. But even though we were exploring 2 or 3 or 4 story high buildings, at the end we came out with basically a 2-story building where all these services are, which is this long bar that we shifted here. And the classrooms are, as you can see in this section, on 1 floor, and the garden of each area of the school climbs on top of the roof of the other wing of the school. So we have here elementary school, or kindergarten, elementary, and high school. And each of these areas have its own ambience, its own garden that takes advantage of the roof of the next wing of the school. This, at the beginning, of course, they were a little bit reluctant to have this type of school, but I think it came out it's a very lively school. The kids run up and down these smooth hills during recess, and from the main building is back there, and everything is connected to that building. And of course, these are all photographs, but the garden is aging, and the garden is at the end going to be the main main part of architecture. The structure of the ceiling of the classrooms are these bended surfaces that were designed by Arquitecto Tonda, Juan Antonio Tonda, who used to work with Felix Candela. He was the guy that designed with Candela many structures in Mexico, and we worked with him in this project, among others, and I think it's a very efficient way of making a roof. it's very thin slab, but it's folded, and its strength comes out of those foldings. And the idea of the garden connected to the landscape. Architecture, garden, and landscape connected. This is an old building that we transformed. It was a warehouse, and we transformed it into a gallery, art gallery. We reinforced it's a very uncommon structure. In Mexico, we don't have this type of wood structure, so immediately we saw this. It was collapsing, but we reinforced the wood structure. We opened like a lantern on top, and basically we clean up the building. I think once again is a structure, in this case with the light is well controlled. There is a double glazing in order to control the light, with the possibility to shade, to have completely dark space, with walls that could be movable, but the structure is always there. It's part of is what makes the space, and the gardens in between the buildings, the office building and the gallery itself. So as you see, the garden, this is I'm going to show you now a few houses where, of course, the garden is still a main theme, garden and structure. As you see, the structure is what conforms the space. There are no other elements that ornament or finishing the structure. The bearing walls and the columns are what are part of architecture. There are no other elements but the structural elements. Here we can see these brick walls, some steel elements, columns and main beams, and the rest is out of wood. It's a fantastic site, very nice views, and so the house is open to the views, open to the is very concerned of how the sun moves. I think the sun is one of the most important parts of architecture. How you today, before getting here, there was a big crowd taking the sun on the staircases. I think architecture is much about catching the sun. We need the sun for all. The energy of the planet is given by the sun. And the garden, of course, have some geometrical elements. Sometimes the garden is very wild, but there are some because it's not landscape, natural landscape. Is gardening. Is controlled landscape or touched landscape. So there are different collections of plants. Barragan used to say that you should design a house like a garden and a garden like a house. And I know it's like just a game of words, but yeah, it means that you have to create sequences and rooms and spaces into the garden, and let the garden into the house. This is another house in a very, very nice setting. It's a southern slope with a forest. So we wanted to preserve as many trees as possible. So the house was split into different volumes. Each volume responds to the paths that existed on the site. There were 3 paths. So the volumes are positioned where those paths were, where we affected less the site. And here is a photograph that taken from an helicopter, and you see how the house is resting in between the trees, which is very beautiful because during winter and summer you get the light filtered. In winter you have naked trees and much more light into the house, and in summer it's much more shaded. So you have this natural envelope on top of the building, which not only the atmosphere, but the temperature of the house is much more pleasant. And you have all these natural patterns created by the leaves, so we don't have to make serigraph things on the windows. It's just natural. We have those patterns moving all day long. The roofs of the house, they become part of the garden because the house is sloping down, or even reflecting ponds like this one that has 1 inch deep, but changes the whole atmosphere of even this big volume where the bedrooms are is completely disappeared by the reflection of the water. That's the living and dining room there. This is another house following, let's say, the same principles as the previous houses, trying to catch the best orientation, responding to the site. There was like a topographic accident here where during rainy days the water runs through this space, so we broke the house and we let the nature go through the house. It's not, of course, a river, but tends to be. So the house, even though all the street is up here, in this neighborhood, all the houses are attached to the street, very close, one with another. We decided to put the house back there into the wildest area of the site. Of course, you have to walk from the street to the house. Here is the main plan: kitchen, dining and living room with a staircase there. So you have to move through the garden in order to get to the house. And the house is connected to the rear garden and the front garden. So all the spaces are, somewhere connected with the exterior. Also, the roof tops that becomes part of the garden are connected to the lower areas, and the transparency from one side of the house to another. Once again, the transparency and the water, the dry river that goes through the house. Once again, very few materials, brick, concrete, and wood and glass, basically. There are no reinforced vertical elements, but the brick walls, concrete elements where they are needed, This is another house. This house was all built out of concrete. It was like a request of the owner, and we said, well, yeah, we would love to do that experiment with you. But the house is like a labyrinth. He has, well, by that time he had 3 little children, and the idea was that they could go into the house and out to different gardens from many ways. And another rule was always when you enter to a space, you couldn't discover each space at once, but you have to turn around to get into more intimate areas like here or in the entrance. So in such a way that you could have always the open doors of every room and still be in a very intimate atmosphere. House has to do much with intimacy. And even though these are, this is a very big house for a wealthy client, it's a real challenge to waste so much space in a way. So we did all these turns around and all this labyrinth to waste space in a cheerful way. And of course the light is once again a basic theme. We were very excited how the concrete with different textures start to catch the color of the surrounding, how it changes color as the light changes, and how it diffuses sometimes. The very strong edges of the concrete sometimes disappear with the reflection of the light. And with the garden, there is behind that little slope with vegetation, there is a 3-story house that we disappeared with vegetation. This is another house in a different context. This is by the Gulf of Mexico, where there are strong winds, very strong winds, a lot of hurricanes. So we did a house with an introverted house with a patio where you can open the doors and be protected from the strong winds. So it has a central patio, but there are several other patios for each room, for each chamber, for each room has a secondary patio and the main patio at the center. This section is very hot weather, so we have very high ceilings and very low cantilevers to protect from the sun, except in the northern face of the house. And this contrast came out very nicely, because you have a very, very low scale in the corridor around the patio. That, of course, with the staircase that connect to the rooftop, which is part of the garden. So you have this contrast of the very low scale and the high space of the big volume, air volume, to have more fresh rooms. And once again, very few materials. Few materials for many reasons. The principle of all is that we work less. Less encounters between different materials. We can finish the projects with very few plans and few problems. And besides, I think less maintenance, less complication. This is another house. This one is in California, in a very dramatic site, fantastic site with 360 degrees views. It's on a hilltop. We had to split the house in two because it's a very big property, and there is an inner road that goes from this point of the entrance, but goes down to another area of the property. So we had a very small area to build the house, and it was cut by this road. So we decided that that was not a problem, but it was an attractive thing for the house. So it was, and besides there is very few rain in this area, so you could go from one pavilion to another. There is another underground pavilion here and here. So the house, like terraces down the hill. Here we see the house from the entrance. Once again, the landscape is a main element of architecture, even though here we deal with another completely different kind of vegetation. It's a very dry, semi-desertic area, but with these beautiful torrey pines all around. We planted like 50 new torrey pines and local species that will integrate with the house. This is the situation, which is this is the bad view towards the lagoon and the highway, and on the other direction you have the ocean. It's a very spectacular sight, and our concern was not to ruin it. I hope we didn't ruin it. And once again, concrete in the part where the house touches the land, the retaining walls and the basement, the first floor of the house is out of concrete, and the second floor, the top part, is out of wood. That's the entrance gallery and the different spaces of the house. And you know, the vegetation, the roof gardens, that suddenly they are completely integrated to the natural terrain. Well, and this is another house, same principles. This is basically, it's also in California, and it's also a combination of concrete basement and retaining walls and wood, steel and wood. Once again, the house is interrelated with the gardens and the landscape. So this is, once again, the sequences, the change of ambience and scales and light are part theme of the house. The interrelation of interior and exterior again. And very simple, as you see, it's a very simple structure. And the sun, of course, controlled into the house. In fact, in these two houses in California, we were required to put air condition and heating, but they never use it. I think that's a very important thing to work with if you orientate the house rightly and use the right materials, you can get rid, of course maybe not in New York, but in many other areas of the world, you can get rid of mechanical devices for heating and cooling. Okay, I'm going to show you, I don't know if maybe this is the last, no, this is not the last project. It's another house. This house is in China. This was, they were supposed to build a pond. Maybe they already did that pond. Our site was right here. A very dense site with very dense vegetation. So we decided to place the house not in the site, but in the rice field that was supposed to become a pond. And after, I think this thing is not working anymore, but after spending a couple of weeks in China, we discovered that traditional architecture is disappearing. All the Chinese students come to America to study, and they go back and they build buildings like in Houston or New York, and they are knocking down all the traditional architecture. So we said, well, why we don't do a Chinese house? We came all this far, and why not to do a Chinese house? So we wanted to explore that possibility. So we did this house all out of wood, with basically wood. And the roof was the main element that will give us the let's say, the Chinese look. But of course, we didn't go into the sophistication of a pagoda, but we discovered that by changing the angle of the roof, we could have a very dynamic and also very modern, very organic and modern building with this traditional way of building. So in the area of the bedrooms, which are at the center of the body, the roof has much more protection, and on the end of the building, at the beginning of or the end of the building, on the tips of the building, are the living and dining spaces, the gathering spaces with a more open. The roof is not so heavy, or so the angle is more soft and is more open to the garden, to the landscape. So there are concrete piles into the soil that they go slightly above the water level, and the wood structure, very, very simple wood structure. So here we have a model of the structure, the bedrooms in the central area and the living spaces on the both ends of the building. We see the way the wood is constructed in a very logical way. We never went back to China because they stopped paying us and we stopped going. But then 2 years after, they sent us 3 photographs, and these are the photographs that we have, which is very exciting to see all this bamboo scaffolding, and we said, wow, really looks like somebody else did it. And in fact, somebody else did it. I think there is a very published building by Stephen Hall a few 100 meters from this one. And I hope by now this thing is became that lake that they told us it was going to be. Well, to end with, this is the last project. It's basically we are reusing a very old hacienda of the 18th century in Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico. As you can see, there are few buildings. It was a very small constructions. There is a small construction there, small construction up there. Everything is divided with wall, very low walls out of stone. Dry stone is not is stone that is not tied together with mortar, but is dry stone. There is a lot of stone in the peninsula, so everything is out of stone. And so we work on the gardens, on cleaning up these buildings, reusing them in the best way we could, and create gardens in between. The photographs have no sequence. We did that pavilion, wood pavilion, into the jungle and a swimming pool. Each garden has a different theme, as you will see. This is the swimming pool and the pavilion with the existing walls. These walls were like pens for animals or for agriculture, some of them. So we preserved all these walls and ruins, and we built as less as possible, the minimum needed, and the rest was devoted to gardening. We plant those fantastic plants like this size, and in 2 months they were that big. It's like magic. And that's another very exciting part of gardening, that first it hides architecture. So if you hides up all the mistakes, let's say, and besides it changes a long time and and it's difficult. It's you know. I think it's more, for instance, that tree is that color for a month, and the rest of the year, there is a part of the year that is completely naked, and part of the year is with very dense foliage. Here are these little leaves when were just planted. We had the chance of moving stones. We moved a lot of stones. This place full of this calcarean stone. So as you know, to build a garden, the first movement is to place stones in the right manner, and after the stones, the big trees, and at the end, the small plants. And of course, it's a feast of colors and flavors. And there is a very interesting characteristic in this area. There is let's say, a huge amount of underground water. So we did these solar pumps with a lot of fountains that during the day, depending on the intensity of the zone, the pumps start to work and the garden starts to be irrigated by these pumps, gardens and fountains. And at night, as the sun sets, the pumps start to, they slowly, as the sun sets down, the solar pumps stop to work, and then only the frogs and the crickets are making the music. And we discover, of course, different kind of plants that we have in Mexico City, on California, black, purple ground covers contrasted with dark greens. And that's the existing 18th century. It's from the end of the 18th century. It's a very small hacienda, but very magic. It's like this building, the whole building has like 150 square meters. So we created these ponds in front. That's the scheme, a real lesson, because the weather here is very, very warm, but the house is very fresh, and it's because of thick walls, very small openings, and cross ventilation, which are the basic rules to build here. And I think we couldn't done better than these guys did 200 years ago. So as you can see, there's not much difference between what they built 200 years ago. It functions fairly well now. We put some lamps and new furniture. Bathrooms, we put a couple of bathrooms and kitchen, but the rest was there and working, still working. And the roof. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Questions?
Okay, thank you. No questions.
Barry.
Just have one. Did you say, I think you can talk about this a bit tomorrow, but I'm very curious about the hanging book stack. Tell us a little bit more about how that works. You said rather rapidly in passing that you found it was easier to hang the books from to hang the stacks than.
Yeah.
Could you give us a little bit more about the reasoning behind that and how that works?
Yeah, we have this main space, And in the first section that we did, the books were, of course, they were in this central position by the main, in the nave, in the very central part of the nave. And there were cantilevers coming out from both areas, from both reading room areas, cantilevered to the central core of the building. But we were cantilevering the heaviest part of the floors, which were the bookshelves. So instead of cantilevering or having big columns from foundation to the top, we decided that if we could connect the building on the top in big truss and hang the books, will be much lighter than to have a heavy structure holding up the books. As you know, the steel has much more strength in tension than in compression. So the structure of the bookshelves are this thin. I mean, it's a square section of 2 inches with very thin steel blades on both sides, which create the bookshelf, and it, you know, it has 8 stories that thick. So it was very efficient. We had good engineers working with us to solve it. They were very enthusiastic to do it, and basically that's the way it works. Yeah.
I gather from seeing your projects, you really enjoy working with concretes. I wonder, why do you love working with concrete so much?
Well, first it's a material that for structural reasons is very resistant, obviously. But besides, if you leave it exposed, I found it like a nice finish. It ages very nicely. You don't have to paint it. I think the way architecture ages is very important, and not architects, we don't take it much into consideration, but I think it's a very important part of architecture, how the building ages. And concrete as stone, a long time, it ages well. And there are other materials, aluminum and all these, many of the new materials that have been in use for the last 20 years, a long time, they don't age well. They look like, you know, like falling apart instead of having this strength that ruins have. So I think concrete has that interesting characteristic.
Thanks. Great talk. Is it okay to ask your opinion, if you have one, of proposed changes to the New York Public Library?
To be honest, I've heard that they're changing the book stacks. I read something yesterday in the airplane, but I'm not very acquainted with the situation. I remember that it's a beautiful library, but I don't know what I've heard that there was a controversy.
Well, yes, I'm not prepared to give it all, but there's going to be major changes, at least proposed, and I thought maybe because of your library work, you might have known about that. You're probably somebody will ask about it tomorrow, I would think.
To be honest, I'm not acquainted with the
Okay,
discussion.
thanks. Okay, thanks.
It shouldn't stop you from having opinions. In this city, you should just do it.
You had a really nice turn of phrase with the house that had the bridge in it. You said, I think it was a mistake in the topography or something like that? Or where the water runs between the two halves of the house when it rains.
Right.
And I just thought it was a nice way of thinking about it, that, what could be a mistake in the topography. So I'm kind of curious if you ever find yourself taking advantage of things that might otherwise seem like errors or a bad situation that you can take advantage of. Like, how do you go about that?
Right. Maybe I wanted to say it was an accident in the topography, and I said a mistake, maybe?
Accidents.
It's a mistake of an accident. It was my mistake to say a mistake. No, yeah, I think we have to take advantage of accidents. The accidents are what is not common, is what gives you a different possibility of action. No? So the accidents are fantastic opportunities to do something that otherwise you wouldn't do.
And in this case, it was an accident of translation. It's one of the most beautiful things is the expression, the accidented landscape, coming from a different language. But you use that accident to make a very beautiful point. And it seems like a good moment. So thank you.
Thank you.